Hi, I'm Zoe Costin, and I'm in the field office here at the School of Social Work. And as mentioned, Laura Lewis could not be here, but luckily she wrote something out. So I'm just going to read this exactly as it's written. She's reading, she's obviously speaking in first person. So if MSW students are interested in international social work, there are a range of options available to them. Short-term study abroad can be more feasible than international field placements in terms of cost and time away. Students interested in this option should plan to meet with Dr. Diane Elsie, MSW Director, as she catalogs the various offerings. The School of Social Work has a number of courses with international content that students can also enroll in. Students interested in international placements can find more information about the requirements on our school's website. They should be noting their interest on their field application, which is due by November 1st. International placements are done in a block placement with all 480 hours being completed in the student's final semester, whether that be the spring or the summer, depending on if they're a full-time or part-time student. There is a great value in pursuing exposure to international content, i.e. through study abroad, international internships, and School of Social Work coursework. These include learning about social work and social welfare practices different than in the U.S., understanding the impact of social issues such as poverty in other countries, cultural learning, and the development of ethno-relativism. Today's theme of ethics and study abroad prompted me to share with all of you the framework I use as I develop international placements. I rely heavily on a framework developed by Benjamin Lowe, 2009, related to effective practice in international social work field placements. I believe that students should take on a meaningful role within the agency and that there should be a degree of reciprocity, mutual understanding, and trust. Extremely important for students is a commitment to cultural competence and a stance of cultural humility. This requires ongoing self-reflection and self-critique and a commitment to lifelong learning and reflective practice. Students should also be provided with adequate support throughout their experience. Here at the School of Social Work at UB, we require students to journal continuously about their experience. A faculty member is assigned to support the student. They monitor the student's journal and provide ongoing feedback. The faculty member also schedules phone or Skype conferences with the student and the agency supervisor. Dr. Philomena Critelli is the supervisor for Sarah Zammiello. Philomena can tell you a bit about what the role entails and also can share with you information about UB School of Social Work coursework that provides an international perspective and can help students prepare for time abroad. We'll then hear from Sarah Zammiello herself. She is currently placed in the Dominican Republic. We will then hear from Stephanie Vroman-Goodrich, a School of Social Work alum who did her advanced year placement abroad and who is also a former Peace Corps volunteer. Also, just putting in a plug for Sarah's blog, that it's great and people should be checking that out. Also, please note, students interested in an international placement should schedule to meet with Laura Lewis before November 1st. So even though the deadline for the field application is November 1st, it's very important to figure out if what your thoughts and interests are going to be something that's criteria and will be a good match for an international placement. Dana Horn, Assistant Dean for Student Services, helps students develop an individualized plan for completing coursework. Thank you very much. Any questions before I go? I can certainly give it a try. All right, thanks very much.
All right, so this is a video that Sarah did for us. She's a current MSW student in her last year. Well, she explains kind of what the video is about, so I'll just leave it up to her. And the audio is a little funky. It kind of sounds like she's underwater. So you're going to have to bear with us.
Hello, some of you that don't know, I'm Sarah Zammiello. I'm here in Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, doing my field placement for my MSW advanced standing.
Can everyone hear okay?
So I'll start with talking about my organization, which is really awesome. Community Service Alliance. They were founded obviously here in the Dominican Republic in about 2004. They're co-founders. One is from Buffalo, actually, from Orchard Park, Elizabeth, and Vigo, who is Dominican. They're husband and wife, and they've been running this organization now for about 11 years. So CSA, first of all, probably the most important thing to tell you is that CSA was founded and runs based off student groups, volunteers coming from the U.S. So basically, we have a project proposal, and within every project contains the amount of funding that they're going to receive from each student that comes to volunteer. So every student that comes obviously pays for their transportation, their food, all those things, but then there's also a certain amount that's for donation that's included in every amount that a student pays. So Dominican College is involved with it, Albany, UAlbany. There's tons of U.S. colleges and universities across the U.S. that come down to DR every year. We have about 11 schools that come religiously every year to help out. So basically their funding makes a big difference in a lot of the projects. We also do reach outside funding, but that is the main base of CSA. That's how we function, is through student groups coming. So CSA really works on three main things: health, youth, and education. So all of their projects, one way or another, fit into that area. The most important thing to me about CSA, the greatest thing about CSA, the most social worky thing about CSA is that it's included right in their mission, that their mission really is to channel the resources that exist in the local communities, in the rural communities, in the Latte communities, and using the local leaders there and working with them to build the capacity of communities to start projects, to continue projects, to help build business skills or whatever it may be that's needed in those communities, rather than identifying needs from the outside, walking in and being like, oh, you guys need this project. Every project that we do is working with multiple partners, multiple organizations, the Ministry of Education, the local women's cooperative, everything. So that's a really great thing about CSA. That's how all of our projects function. The project that I'm working on is through USAID. It's funded by USAID. It's a project, I believe, a 3 or 4 year long project that CSA has been doing 2 years now. That is a countrywide project by USAID for the Dominican Republic called Adaptations. And it really tackles all the main issues that this country struggles through. So education being the main one, especially in the rural areas and Latte communities. Most people don't have, most youth do not get an education past about 7th or 8th grade. Like the case in one of the communities where I've been a few times where we're doing some of our work. It's called El Cerrito. It's out in the east of the country near Atamaya. And their biggest struggle is education because they only have one community school. Once kids graduate from that school, they don't have another option because they want to spend 400 pesos each way to get out of the community to get to the closest public high school. So most of these kids obviously drop out and then just work. So the education level is not very high here, especially in these communities that in El Cerrito, the poverty rate is over 80-85%. Quite low number, but so that's exactly what CSA does. Instead of working here in San Domingo, in the city where a lot of organizations already exist, a lot of big places are giving funding, CSA goes out to the rural areas, to the sides of the country that aren't getting a lot of help, and tackles those rural communities, those small organizations, and really helps them build their capacity. We do trainings, we provide them with either startup funding, or we just help them build the organization to a point where they can manage themselves, they can apply for funding, things like that. So yeah, it's really great. So Alerta Open, get off on tangents very often. Alerta Open is also provides vocational training for these kids that only have an 8th grade education, but they're 20 years old. So they do vocational trainings in anything really, in English and computer science, upholstery, plumbing, really tourism, a wide variety of things that are going to get them a job here. And so when they finish that vocational training, they get a certificate, and it really opens up their opportunities to earn their own money. And another part of it is, like the whole one is documentation. So we help, CSA helps people mostly in the Bates, who are Dominican Haitian, who either are from Haiti or who have parents or grandparents from Haiti and are not living here. So they help get documentation. So I think that was last year. Which may not seem like a big number, but for someone who, I'm sure most of you know the situation with the Haitians living in the Dominican Republic right now. I haven't heard much news of the deportations, but I also know, and no one really talks about it, but I also know that most of the handlings of trafficking of Haitians back and forth through the Dominican Republic and a lot of the human rights violations, most of that is behind closed doors. So I doubt that the deportations are going to be all of a sudden out in the open, like, look what we're doing to these people. I'm sure it's more of a hidden thing. So to answer a lot of people who ask me that, no, I haven't seen it. I have heard about it. It's not the news. I haven't seen deportations within the Bate that I'm working at. So that's to answer that question. But again, for the 70 people that we have helped and we're continuing to help and who now have citizenship papers, you can go to school, you can get health care, you can do all these things that a Dominican citizen can do. There's a lot of parts to the whole thing. But the part that I'm working in is in special schools called espacios para crecer. And the purpose of them is the regular public school teachers pick out the kids that they really notice are struggling, and it's most struggling with behavior or learning, and most of the time it's because we have 15-year-olds in 4th grade. And that's just part of the struggle of this country. So what happens is they're pulled out of their regular school only for half the day. They still go to regular school. They come to these espacios where I'm working for half of their day. And most of it is personal growth activities. So there's a lot of recreation built into, they'll do like a recreational activity but tied into family values or doing chores or completing homework. Really basic things, confidence in establishing values, family, friendship, recognizing personal characteristics that are really going to boost their academic success. So things like that, it's personal growth related. So that's my main job right now. What I've done is I went to the annual training by USAID that taught on the people. They're called facilitators. They're not trained teachers, but they're mostly women from the communities who just want to help out. They don't get paid very much, but they really want to work with these kids who are struggling. So I was lucky enough to go to that training, and I, from that training, I took my books and I did everything, and I developed an evaluation tool because although USAID has this great program, they don't have a way to evaluate whether it's having an impact on the students that are going through it. And it's a 10-month program, so it could really make a big difference, especially when it focuses on developing personal growth and confidence and self-esteem and all these things, and there's no way to really evaluate it. So my organization, CSA, decided, okay, we want you to develop this. And so, I developed a pretty basic evaluation tool so that we can look at not just academic achievement, because the only way right now they're judging the success of the students is through the grades at the end of the year. So the assessment tool I've created really evaluates a lot of the different areas of growth that these kids can have. So that's been my main project. And so now I've actually moved. I only live about 5 minutes outside of the Bate community now. Oh, sorry, I don't think I explained for those of you that probably don't know. Bate communities are something that's pretty specific to the Dominican Republic and the history of sugar plantations here. And to this day, if you ask me, it's modern day slavery and a lot of the Bates, but that's a tangent for another day. Bate communities are basically communities of people who work on sugar plantations. So, but you have, whole families, you have bunches of kids and all they grow to be pretty big. The one that I work in, Bate Lecheria, it's actually pretty big, and you have stores and they have clothing stores and places to buy food and all these things. So, the things with these communities is that a lot of the men travel for the safra, which is the sugar cane season, the cutting season. A lot of the men travel, and from plantation to plantation, and that creates a really, really big opportunity for HIV and AIDS and STDs and STIs. So the HIV rates in these bates has been, what a lot of people have done research on, it can be 2, 3, 4, 5 times the rate of the Dominican Republic, which is 0.8, which isn't too bad. So there's a lot of high risk in these communities. There's a lot of prostitution. Funny enough, there's a lot of poverty, but at the same time, there's a lot of drug use, selling, and there's a lot of illegal activities, unfortunately. And that's mostly because most people don't work, other than the sugar plantations. And, people don't have the money or the access to leave the communities in order to go out and work. And I never realized it more than when I moved here, that it's so much more desolate and far from everything else that it's really difficult. Like, I even found it expensive. I have to take a motorcycle, ride on the back of a motorcycle now to work every day. And, even to me, I was like, oh, this is kind of expensive compared to taking the metro in the city every day. So I can only imagine, how expensive it is for the kids to leave, for anyone to leave, either to go to work outside or to, the kids have to go to school outside the community. Most of them, you see them all in their uniforms on the back of motorcycles going back and forth every day. So that's obviously especially within these buses, which is great. It's really enjoy it. I think I've rambled about CSA a good amount of time, but if anyone still has questions, I'm here. As Stephanie will tell you, you guys can message me during the function, and hopefully I can get right back. Obviously, internet or water, electricity, so that stuff is not, a big thing out here. But I will do my best. And then I feel like I've already talked a lot about how social work ties into CSA's work, ties into generally what's, the status of the country here, but I'm sure I can come up with a lot more examples. At CSA, there's basically more than enough space for you to be a full-time employee, let's put it that way. I mean, there's just tons of things to do. There's a lot of grant writing to be done and really identifying projects that can be created and new things that we can be doing and funding to get identified. It's more just a matter of the people at CSA don't really have the time for it right now. So I don't have a full job offer for those that kind of know about it and don't quite know about it. I don't have an official job offer because there's no money. But right now, we're looking at either pulling funding from one of the grants that's coming in from Rotary International, or writing a position for me into the grant that I'm actually working on right now. So, I don't know, we'll see. It's just asked to kind of bring it up. They do love me there. I do feel like there's a huge space for social work. There's so much for me to do that I feel like I barely accomplished anything in my 2 months because there's so much to do. But for example, in the Latte where I'm working now, it actually was founded by a religious organization. It's called Fe y Alegría, which is faith and happiness, but it's run by nuns. So the head nun, she actually wants to have a social worker start up a program to identify the need, because there's a lot of kids that drop out in Lattes and don't really need to go to school anymore. They'd rather just drop out and work and make money. So she was really interested in starting a program, or exactly right, we're having a social worker to start up a program. Maybe not to necessarily try to pull 18-year-olds back into school. It's kind of unrealistic, but with the goal of maybe even talking to these kids and working with all the kids on the street and identifying what it was that pushed them to drop out, why they lost interest in school, and then using all that information, maybe have CSA would be interested in creating new programs in the community to really tackle those barriers and see if we can increase retention rates and reduce dropout rates. So that's another good example. If you ask anyone here, every time you meet someone that networks, Save the Children, USA, UNCSA, oh, we're social, I'm a social worker too. But they don't, they just mean that they work with people, they work at an NGO, instead of ONAH, which is in Spanish. Yeah, so there's not really professional social work here, but there's a lot of people that do really great things, and it's just kind of funny because they don't understand that it's a career in the U.S. So it's like, oh no, I studied social work and I'm a social worker. They're just like, no, but what's your career? What do you do? It's pretty amusing. But yeah, I wish I could think of more examples, but I mean, as you can see, there's a huge space for social workers here. Endless amount of work, and I hope that I'm lucky enough to be able to either stay or come back and work, so we'll see. If anyone has more questions, I feel like I talked forever, but if you still have more questions, feel free to contact me. I do have a blog through the School of Social Work if anyone's interested in reading. You can find that through their website. And that's about it. I really enjoyed launching. I really missed coming to the local retreat, so I enjoyed. Thanks for listening.
All right, so that's Sarah. Okay. Dr. Pacelli, do you want to speak a little bit about how you're connecting with her?
Yes. Well, as you can see, she's having a very substantial international experience there, and I've been supervising Sarah and reading her blogs and discussing with her the process of her adaptation there and the different tasks that she's been doing. And when we were having one of our global interest group meetings, it just hit me that I feel Sarah did, like, her trajectory is really, I think, a great case study in terms of how to enter into international social work. I get lots and lots and lots of emails from students who are very interested in trying to figure out how to do that. And I think some of the lessons that we can take from Sarah's experience could be helpful to you. Number one, Sarah took a lot of initiative, and she made contacts here in Buffalo with people who were doing international work. And I think she had some kind of undergraduate experience with that organization, and she kept in touch with them. So networking and just really figuring out what's out there is really, really important. Another thing, and this is a shameless plug for my course, she took the International Social Work course, and I think that my dream is to really see us have a sequence here where people would take the course and then do the placement, because the course really does afford you a very systematic. All students pick a country that they do a very intensive series of research papers around various aspects of health, social welfare, human rights. And Sarah took the course and was able to really, like, her special interests were back-take communities and some of the issues for the undocumented Haitians. But she was able to fully research the Dominican Republic before she went. And so she got there very well prepared to sort of understand what she was going to confront. Although it's another thing, I think, to see it in person, because one of her blogs, you'll see she was very taken aback. She had written a lot about the literacy rates there, but when she confronted her first kid who she wanted to do some kind of assessment for him, and he was kind of flummoxed by it, and she didn't know what that was about, he was illiterate. So actually confronting that is, I think, really educational. So while she's there, I think she's been really doing a substantial job. She's not, she threw herself from day one. She threw herself into the experience, and they are also giving her, I think, very challenging tasks to do, and that has worked very much in her favor. She rose to the challenge, and she will, if she doesn't get a job there, I think they will try to connect her to some other organizations that are working there. So I think these are, in my experience, these are all the kinds of steps that really do make a difference when you want to try to break into this work. I just want to talk for 1 second about some of the courses that are here that offer international content, because that's another way, as I said, to prepare for international field work or to actually have interface internationally. And we currently, I'm actually offering 2 courses. One is called International Social Work, which I did describe, and that one really looks at health education, social welfare, human rights from an international perspective, from a global perspective. And while you don't really, go anywhere, you actually get a chance to really research a country of your interest and do some comparisons with us. Another class that's being offered that offers global content is called Disability and Human Rights through the Lens of Social Work and Law. And that course is totally online, and it's a collaboration with this law school in Mexico. So through that course, you actually get a chance to really interface with students in that country. And the professor that's teaching it there is now, he just landed this very important job being as the head of this Human Rights Commission in Mexico City that's implementing the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. He has tons of contacts with NGOs, and so this is another way to try to get your feet wet, meet people from other countries, learn what NGOs are there. And I think that right now the U.S. International, the State Department, et cetera, are trying to promote more study abroad with Mexico. It's our closest neighbor. And even teaching this course, I have learned so much about policy there. Like, did you know they have universal health care there? They were one of the people that drafted, they were very heavily involved in drafting the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. These are things that we don't really know until we actually dig in and learn about our neighbors. We often don't learn about our neighbors. So I think these are just two examples, and I know there are other classes. I think the classes on immigrants and working with immigrants and refugees are really excellent preparation and got you kind of thinking about getting more global and international perspectives. So I have flyers for the classes that I will pass around. This registration is open, and that's really all I think I'll say. Does anybody have any questions?
Or like anybody to enroll?
October. I think I put soon because I didn't know the exact date, but I know it's sometime in October. Oh.
John from International Education. I'm wondering if you can comment on the interest level in the school and continuing to offer winter programs. You've done it, Laura's done it. I think that's a great opportunity too, because the person can get their feet wet and then maybe think about field experience afterwards.
Excellent point. I'm glad I forgot to mention that. We do from time to time have study abroads during the winter session. We have one that has gone to Moldova. I led one to Italy that looked at issues of migration. And one of the things that we really would love to do with this human rights and disability course is to build in a study abroad. The university there is very, very interested in it, and we've been in some preliminary discussions about how to work that in so the students can actually take the course and then have that final piece of going to the country to see some of the NGOs and actually see Mexico. So thank you for raising that. That's another excellent way to get your feet wet.
I'm Walt Hockel in the Department of English and the Asian Studies program, so very much just sort of a fly on the wall, but I couldn't keep my mouth closed. One question is, what sort of funding is available for this, and are there fellowships? What if a student applies for a competitive fellowship and wishes to do a year? How can they work that into their MSW program?
That's something that I'm not totally prepared to answer. I think that's a little tricky because we have a very structured type of program because we are a professional program. So we have to follow the mandates of Council on Social Work Education. So it took some work to be able to even do these block types of placements because students do have to take certain prerequisites and certain foundation courses. But Zoe would know better.
My understanding is, I'm sure you may want to have more, is I understand that there is the possibility of someone doing a year in the Peace Corps. So basically the reality would be it would be a 3-year program where then they'd be doing something in addition to that, because you're right, we're very structured. And so that, but I know that the School of Social Work is very excited about supporting these international opportunities, and certainly, basically, I think willing to do anything that's within our power to make something like that work. I don't know if you'd be.
Yeah, I would say this is an issue that we're aware of. It's
Yes, it's
expensive to go study somewhere else or do a placement somewhere else. We don't have everything lined up yet. The dean has been very, very generous in providing small amounts of money to support the students that go abroad. But I also think that this is something that various entities outside the school might be very interested in. So we are trying to cultivate money so that students going forward for international placements in the future will have money. Hopefully each year it'll be a little bit more support that we can give, but right now it's something we're working on.
I just know that, for example, USAID has internships at embassies abroad. The Fulbright program, one of my missions is to get more people to apply for the Fulbright. I think what's very clear with, I can't remember her name, but
Sarah?
foreign language study seems to have enabled her to do the work that she's doing there. And I think foreign language study is essential if you really want to get involved.
That's another really excellent point to bring up, because that is sometimes an inhibitor, because it means students can really only go to certain countries. Some students have gone to India because they do speak English there, but it's true, Sarah took Spanish, and that's one of the underlying goals too of our study abroad. We're hoping to figure out some way to build in some. Spanish is really a very, I think, very important language in our field because we have so many Latin American immigrants. So that's a great point too.
And I just wanted to add that, and this is kind of slightly non sequitur, but just that as a grad student, I've been able to, because I'm a full-time enrolled grad student, I'm even able to audit a language class in addition to the courses I'm taking. So that's a possibility. I mean, if you come in and you do 101, 102, and then 201, you'd be eligible for, at least I know the critical language scholarship, or possibly, I'm not sure what the language requirements are for some of the other grants and programs, but it's a lot of extra work. I mean, auditing, you don't have to take the exams. We'll see if anyone really thinks I even speak the language, but because I haven't had time to study it. Arabic.
Oh.
So, but it's been really awesome to be able to take basically Arabic classes for free in addition to the courses that I'm taking.
So I just had a question because I wanted to I wanted to audit language classes, but it would have cost me more money from what I understood from registrar. Am I
Are you full-time enrolled?
Yes.
Okay, we'll talk afterwards.
Okay. All right.
I'm full-time enrolled and I'm not paying any extra to audit the class.
Okay. She told me that
It's not
only
extra tuition.
Yeah.
There's just paperwork and it has to be done before the registration deadline, the ad drop deadline.
I think you would pay, if you're a graduate student, if you need to take an undergraduate course, like over the summer, you have to pay graduate tuition for it. That might have been.
There
I have
are
a
some.
question about the Fulbright. If you're a master's level student, I know if you have a master's, you can apply for a Fulbright. If you're a master's level student, however, though, are there Fulbrights available for that?
Yeah, so the Fulbright has, for students, two major programs. One is called the Fulbright English Teaching Assistantship. That's open to, and then there's the Fulbright Research Fellowship. And these are open to rising seniors as undergraduates through PhD students. So generally, we see most undergraduates applying for the English Teaching Assistantship, but graduate students tend to be more oriented towards the research one. The application is very simple. It's actually just for the research, it's a one-page personal statement, two-page project narrative. The thing that's important about the research proposal that I think came up in Sarah's discussion is that you have to know, you want to have letters of affiliation. People saying, I would love if Sarah came and worked with me at my institution. I have something set up for her. And so it's almost like they just need to provide the funding to make this project that's already underway take place. And it's really open as far as what people can do through these projects.
There are some small scholarships out there too. I have a list somewhere that I can try to see if I can distribute it for individuals to apply for scholarships to go on study abroads. And actually, one creative student that came to Italy with us did a GoFundMe campaign. I don't know if this is legitimate to say this, but she managed to raise some money toward her tuition for that.
I don't think Sarah would mind you mentioning Sarah did as well for her study as well. GoFundMe or something like that.
Just to add, I actually did the Fulbright as an English teaching assistant. And so that the English teaching is a big aspect, but we also you're responsible for a side project. So that you really have a lot of flexibility. My interest was healthcare. So we did a lot of public health interventions. So there's a lot of, you learn a lot of new skills because they don't expect you to have a teaching background. And then you also have the opportunity to really do what you want to focus on.
Where were you?
I was in Colombia.
Sorry, everyone wants to go. So how could that fit with the structure, like Linda said, with our 480-hour internship in the one semester? Like, does that fit with the social work program? Because I've looked it up.
I think
it just
you'd
doesn't
have to
seem
take
like it works.
a year.
Okay.
At least my placement, I believe they're all around
Yeah, they are.
a little
for the most
11
part.
months, around a year. So I don't know that you could do
And
that.
the internship is 4 to 5 months, so it's like, yeah, that doesn't really fit in.
And again, I think this is perfect to contact Laura Lewis, and she will be very open, and if a number of students want to meet together, she could just, have a time when people can stop by. I mean, we'll certainly fill her in on this.
I would emphasize that as well, that if you have some great idea for something you want to do or somewhere you want to go and you take a look and you think, well, it doesn't really fit, that's the time to have these conversations. Speak to Laura Lewis about how do you work out the field piece. You can speak to Dana Horn about rearranging what you take when, or Dr. Elsie for the MSW program. There are ways to do this. So if you want to do it, don't be discouraged. Just go have these conversations, and the school is very interested in trying to make this happen.
May I ask, are they currently Peace Corps volunteers in the program? Somebody mentioned that.
I did speak, but I was going to speak next.
And
I then completed my MSW afterwards.
Okay, are you familiar with the SUNY Initiative International Peace Corps Masters Program? I think the social work, the school was
That's
approached about that a
relatively
couple
new,
years ago.
right? Yeah, I don't
The-
believe that was something that was up and running when I did Peace Corps 2006 to 2008.
The SUNY System Administration wanted to partner with Peace Corps on this specifically so that there were special arrangements for volunteers to do their MSW. I don't know if it's more efficient, so that the old experience is all taken care of through the Peace Corps, but that may be something to revisit.
Is it specifically pertaining to a social work degree, or is it like?
There are a number of these master's programs that are worked out with Peace Corps. Some of them are, for example, ESOL, maybe other fields that are directly related to Peace Corps type work. But there are special arrangements that be worked out by the school with SUNY and the Peace Corps itself. Because they like to market the program more broadly, on a national basis.
So that's kind of a good segue. My name is Stephanie Vroman-Goodrich. I was in Macedonia and did the Peace Corps 2006 to 2008. While I was in the Peace Corps, I was partnered with the Red Cross there, and we did a lot of educational programs relating to health, and more specifically, we really went into high schools and talked about human trafficking. It was becoming a bigger issue there. The unemployment rate is extremely high in Macedonia. It's about 45%. So because of that, all high school students want to go abroad. They're ready and excited when they graduate to look for these opportunities all across Europe. So we trained some leaders within the Red Cross youth group to go into the schools and talk about how to safely look for these opportunities, how to write resumes that are going to be looked at and help get offers. We talked about how to apply to colleges abroad and how to work some of these things out, some extra funding that might assist because, people don't have the money to travel abroad, so they're willing to jump at lots of opportunities that are the safest. So that was the main thing that I did while I was in the Peace Corps. And then I returned to Buffalo and wanted to get my MSW. And my very first orientation night, I heard Laura and Diane talk about, oh, we think we might want to have somebody do their field education experience abroad. We're looking into that idea. Nobody had done it at that point, and I was like, me, I want to go back. Let's work this out. Let's plan this. So that was in 2009, and I actually ended up returning to Macedonia in the summer of 2010, and was in a different city. I was in the capital city of Macedonia, which is Skopje, and I worked with La Strada, which specifically focuses on preventing human trafficking, and additionally has a shelter in the capital city for women who are Macedonian who return from having been trafficked to a different country. So, a few things I want to say just about cultural competency and cultural humility. It is a huge commitment level to decide. I mean, we're talking about the financial piece. It costs money. It's a commitment level to learn about the culture, to learn some of the language. I would highly recommend. To give you an example, Peace Corps, their kind of belief system is that you shouldn't be able to do any work until you have a great understanding of the language and also the culture. So the first 3 months, you live with the host family, you only learn about the culture, you take 5 hours of language classes a day, and then you go home and practice with your host family. And then it's a 2-year commitment after that, and they say the first year, you're not going to do anything, you're just going to build relationships. So that being said, you spend about 15 months building relationships, building rapport, learning the language at a greater level. So how do we fit that 15-month idea into 4 or 5 months? And I think the piece that Philomena talked about is really important. I'm working with Laura right now to try to better develop the program so that students do feel prepared. So one of the things we're really pushing is that they take the International Social Work course and spend a lot of time learning more about the country. We really want to make sure people are linked with community partners in the country they're going to who can help kind of explain more cultural issues that students might not be aware of, because it's one thing to do your own research, it's another thing once you get there, you're faced with brand new things. So one thing I want to talk about was not assuming that you know people because you read about them and studied about them. So that's this idea of cultural humility. So when I was an MSW student, cultural competence was the big buzz phrase, and that's important. It's important to be prepared, but I think then to take that preparation, walk into a situation where you're meeting somebody and you're not assuming that you know all about them. You're coming at it from a point of, okay, I have a little bit of knowledge about your country and some traditions, but tell me about you. Tell me about your experience. Because I know, a lot of us in this room were probably born and raised in America, and if somebody came in and thought they knew about each of us because they studied about America, you're like, hold on, there's a lot of diversity in this room, diversity of experience and traditions, and I'm sure we all have very different backgrounds. So talking to individuals and really making them the experts on what they need and how they view themselves and their culture is just really important. What else do I want to say? Another thing that Laura, I know, mentioned in her notes, which Zoe read, was meaningful reciprocity. So don't assume that you know the project and know exactly what should happen. I might read about a human trafficking problem and think, okay, I know exactly how I want to tackle this. I'm going to go over there. And I did. I took some research courses, and I found that there weren't any studies for long-term outcomes of people who survived trafficking. And so I had a research proposal, and one of my hopes was that I could go over there and help the organization kind of start to implement a study like this. And that was kind of my goal. They were not interested. This was not something that they felt was meaningful or important because there was so much work that just needed to be done on a crisis day-to-day level. So for me to have my ideas may be helpful to talk about and bounce it off with the organization, but ultimately they're going to be the ones that you're there to serve and to help, and they're going to be able to identify what's meaningful. So I ended up helping write a lot of grants, especially to USAID and US Embassy, because it helped to have a native English speaker be able to kind of look over those grants. They also wanted me to teach English classes in the shelter, and I was like, I am not an English teacher, I'm a social worker. That's another Peace Corps thing. Everybody wants you to teach an English class. But it's a great way to build relationships. So for me to be able to go in and teach those classes, I got to know a lot more about the women who were there in the shelter than I otherwise would have, because through those English classes they opened up to me about different things, and those weren't conversations I would have been privy to otherwise. And then that helped the staff there, because I was able to say, did you know, have you heard about this traumatic event at this, you know, and they were able to kind of then help more. I do speak Macedonian. You know, through Peace Corps, they assist with language training. That being said, there are some, you know, I don't have the level of language that's needed to do counseling in a different language, right? That's a whole different level of language ability that I'm not quite at. I'm very conversational, but so why should you go abroad? I initially wanted to go abroad because I thought I wanted to do international social work long term, and now here I am back in Buffalo. So currently I am at Evergreen Health Services. I'm the Director of Supportive Services there. For those of you not familiar with Evergreen, we used to be AIDS Community Services, and a few years ago the mission shifted a little bit, and now we serve anyone who has a chronic disease. HIV is now considered chronic. It's not terminal the way it was in the 80s when the organization started. So I oversee a housing program and a transportation program and a volunteer program. And I think that having worked in Macedonia has very much influenced my practice now, because it really helps me understand a few things. One thing that I learned is that change has to come from within communities. So while I could provide extra support and help with grant writing, like I was kind of saying, the community themselves need to identify the project, and they need to be the ones really putting the work in. You know, it was helpful for me to set up some of the training in the high schools when I worked at the Red Cross, but it wasn't helpful for me to lead the trainings. We needed the youth themselves to lead the trainings. So in a similar way right now, Evergreen, we employ a lot of peers, a lot of people from the community to go out and do outreach. I am part of a homeless outreach team right now, and we always try to include people who have been homeless previously and can come out with us and speak to what that experience is like when we meet people and try to engage them in our services. With PrEP, I'm not sure who's familiar with PrEP, but it's a medication that people who are not HIV positive can take, and it actually helps prevent the transmission of HIV. So there's a new big push for PrEP. And we have staff that go into nightclubs and all these unique places to try to talk about PrEP. I would not be one of those people to go into a nightclub because I don't fit in. I'm not that cool. I'm not hip. So we make sure that we're employing people that look like the community. I'm not here trying to say Evergreen is perfect. You know, every organization has things that we're working on, but that is one thing that I really respect and appreciate about where I work. We really try to be more self-aware and reflect the community we serve and the people we hire. So, what else? I guess that's it. My notes. I went a little off course for my notes. We're running out of time, and I want to make sure people have time for questions. So, yes.
Well, I think you made a very good point about the fact that even though you're not working in an international setting now, it's still very valuable to have that experience.
Right.
That was the point I also thought was very important, because something I always say is when we learn about other people, we also learn more about ourselves. And you know, even in the international social work course, students begin to look at, by looking at how other countries approach issues, then you can kind of look a little more reflectively about our, you know, how we do it, and incorporate things that you see from out there here. You know, it's a great way of cross-fertilizing.
Yes.
You mentioned, and also Sarah mentioned, that grant writing was a big part of what you were doing to help these communities. Is that something that you had experience in before? You kind of just like looked at the requirements for the grant and figured out how to do it? I don't really know too much about that.
Grants are usually pretty self-explanatory. Usually the RFPs are really clear. The request for proposals pretty clearly outline what they want included. That being said, I'm pretty sure there's a grant writing course for people with social work.
We have a grant writing. Yes.
Yeah. Peace Corps also did some training around grant writing, so I had that experience.
So is it like necessary to take a course to be able to write grants, or is it something that you can kind of figure out?
I think it would be very helpful.
Yeah.
I think. Go ahead, Pat.
Sometimes the organization will have written a grant, but need help with the English and, you know, putting it into English. And so that's one way that, you know, your English skills can help the organization.
It's always a good idea to take a course like that if you think it's something, you know, that you want to go international. I think most organizations welcome that skill. They do.
Yeah. Can I just say also, the other thing is that some organizations, so wherever you might be, let's say this year, if you're expressing and saying, I'm really interested in learning more about grants, it's possible that they either have someone or can collaborate with another agency, and then there would be the possibility of having some exposure on how to do that, or you might be saying to the agency, gee, I'd like to spend some of my time researching and understanding more about that, and then that could be something that could be part of your learning contract to help you feel educated.
So I just have one other example that I did want to share, just kind of explaining cultural competency and cultural humility and how they intersect. So I had a person in my office last week who is transgender, and they were talking to me about how frustrating their experience was at the doctor. And so my cultural competency, you know, I know enough about some of the difficulties facing transgender people when they go to the doctor's office. I've worked with plenty of transgender people in my work. That I could say, you know, it is really difficult to get those hormones sometimes. Let's talk about, you know, some steps. And they immediately felt more at ease. They're like, oh, you've dealt with this before. Oh, my goodness. I wasn't saying, I know what we can do. Then I was saying, okay, tell me more about your experience. So it's that balance of, I have a background in this. I understand this. But tell me about you specifically. That's the humility piece. It's not me coming in and saying, oh, I'm an expert. I know what to do. Let me just tell you exactly X, Y, Z, and you're all set. It's me having that background that puts them at ease, and then saying, but tell me more about your difficulties, what's going on. I don't know if that example helps make a little more.
I just also wanted to mention briefly too what you've been doing with people who study abroad returning from in the program, if you could mention that.
Yeah, so I've been working with Laura almost a year now, trying to develop more materials for students who are planning their field education experience abroad. So we've kind of just been doing a lot of research right now and collecting materials. So we have a packet with a lot of articles and resources that can help students prepare. And then we want to make sure as well that we're incorporating some things, making some things a little bit more mandatory, which I'll let Laura kind of speak more to that. But things like the International Social Work course, I think is really important for someone planning to go abroad. And then the other side of that, we really want to make sure that students are ready to return back to the States. People put a lot of focus on preparation to leave, and then there's not always preparation to return home, and a lot of people have a much greater difficulty with that. It was really hard for me to come back from the Peace Corps, because everybody thinks it's the easy part. Oh, you're back, you know Buffalo, you're back in Buffalo, and it's like, wait. I had one friend who walked into their like big grocery store in her town in Indiana, and she just started crying because it was so overwhelming. She's like, there's just so many options. What's going on? Why do we have? It's winter. Why do we have all this like fresh fruit? What's going on? It's just be bananas and apples. So there's just certain things that hit people differently. So trying to talk to students right before they come home to prepare them for some of that. Then we had a welcome back event for the students who studied abroad this past spring, which I think was helpful for faculty and staff to be able to greet students. Yeah.
Did you ever encounter any resistance when you were in Macedonia from people saying, what are you doing in my country? Or, I mean, any sort of sense of that? I'm just curious how you might have dealt with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a common Peace Corps experience to be asked if you're a spy or something.
Or even be arrested. I know people who've been arrested as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes along with building rapport. Like, I think the Peace Corps volunteers who kind of dismissed that advice and went in day one and tried to make all these changes and recommendations had a much harder time than those of us who stepped back and just tried to drink a lot of coffee and build relationships. I think it really just takes time. I'm sure there were still people in the community who at the end wondered what we were really there for. I don't doubt that. I think that's a common thing. But I also do see that I was able to make a difference in certain ways. And there were plenty of people who did not feel that way, who would then, it was more meaningful for them to vouch for me than for me to try to defend myself and explain why I'm there, right? So that's kind of how you approach that.
I was just going to say, too, I think this is making me think a lot about my interventions class I took last year in this program, because that's something that I think you have to address no matter what population you're working with or no matter what setting you're in, and that it's important to, even if it's in the moment, like in that immediate moment, recognize some of the underlying, whether it's your background or, you know, if you're not a part of the demographic that you're serving, like to really be able to talk about that in a frank and constructive way. Not that I know how quite yet, but that's why I'm still in the program. But I personally think that that's really important, and I've been glad to be able to start thinking about how to approach that. Yeah.
So question, in terms of returnees, after fieldwork generally, are there courses or follow-up that the school provides to process the experience once students are back?
So generally after fieldwork, students graduate. The
So
way
you
that the
don't really have
program
that
is-
opportunity, yeah.
Right.
That's unfortunate, because I do think it is a major issue.
So
It is for study abroad generally, we tend to neglect it.
of the 5 students that studied abroad this past spring, 2 remained abroad. They're working abroad currently. 3 have returned, and 2 of them I've been meeting with one-on-one pretty regularly, which I think has hopefully been helpful.
Yeah.
So that's kind of been Laura's idea, how to welcome students back a little bit better. Because it's the end of their program, so there's not the same support.
Yes, right.
Obviously, that's optional because, you know.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephanie, for speaking, and Philomena and Sarah.